Amen and good morning. My name is Andy Nelms, and I have the privilege of being the teaching pastor here at Walnut Hill Church and associate pastor Lover's Lane, of which we are a part. And I am so excited to get to worship with you this morning. Before we continue in our worship, I want to let you know we are aware the altar has moved. Okay, that was. I just want to let you know it's happened. We are trying it out this Sunday. Okay, I am so excited that the chancel is so full. I didn't have a place to sit. That was so cool. I want to thank the choir for being here, Miss Rachel for being here and playing the bells this morning. And so we've got a full chancel. And so we believe in Revelation 21 that the home of God is among mortals. That process is happening. And so to symbolize that, we have the altar right here among us. And so if you are very upset about this, my email is davidbarnes@gmail.com. He says it's not. Okay. I do make light. I know that, some of us may not like change. And I just want to let you know, we're trying it out. And we'll let you know how it goes. But I am so excited to be here and worship with you this morning. We are going to continue a series that Pastor Tom began us in last week and called Masquerade, and all about the masks, not these kind of masks, but these masks, right, that we wear, the false selves that we present to others. And as I've been thinking about this series, I've been thinking about, the holidays are coming up. And specifically, Thanksgiving is, now that, Halloween is past, Thanksgiving is coming. Although the department stores think that Christmas follows Halloween, actually Thanksgiving and is one of my favorite holidays. I'll be honest. As a pastor, Thanksgiving and 4th of July are my favorite holidays. There are no religious responsibilities that I have on either of those days. And I love it. I love Thanksgiving, and it's so much fun to be around people, and it's relaxed, and it's just around food, right, and getting to see people. But I know that some of us, even in my own family, we have conversations that tend to happen when all the family gathers. These are conversations that we would rather not have. And with the political tension in our nation, the way that it is, that our nation seems to be more divided politically than ever before, those conversations are more rife with anxiety and conflict. That as we sit down across a Thanksgiving table, maybe for the first time in a couple of years, across family members that we've only seen post things on social media or comment in this way, or maybe we know aligns differently than we ourselves align, we know that those conversations have a tendency to get out of hand. And maybe that causes some anxiety for us. And that's what's really brought me to realize this point. Maybe you know this as well, that our relationships are broken. Our relationships are broken. We have some good relationships, right? We have some good ones, some things that are like really strong, maybe with our spouse or our children, somebody who's really close to us, a friend, a family member. We've got some that are really tight, but then there are these other relationships that are hanging out there that are just broken. And maybe it's causing anxiety as we look forward to the holidays. Maybe they're those people that we avoid, that we, don't want to show up at holidays, that we are avoiding their phone calls, their text messages, their messages. Maybe we're avoiding these people for one reason or another. But I hope that we know this morning, that if we don't know anything this morning, I hope we remember this, that the only way to repair our relationships is to be vulnerable with each other. The only way to repair relationships is to be vulnerable with each other. And that's what we're going to learn about this morning. We are going to be in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19. If you have a Bible with you, if you use your Bible, I encourage you to use it. If you're at home this morning, and I encourage you to grab a Bible wherever you find one. If you use it on your phone, however you engage with the Bible this morning, I encourage you to do that. We're going to be in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, and in the first verse is where we're going to start. This is a story that maybe some of us know, or at least we've heard it before, the story of Zacchaeus. the story of Zacchaeus. Now, sometimes what happens to us, if we've grown up in the church like I have, we hear a story introduced and then we immediately think, oh, I know that story, right? I know about that. And sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes that keeps us from reading this story with fresh eyes. Right? Sometimes it keeps us from hearing the story with ears to listen. And so I hope this morning that maybe we'll put aside some preconceived conditions, right? If you just allow yourself to sing the song of Zacchaeus one time, right? And not 500 times going on in our head. The Zacchaeus was a wee little man, right? Like just, okay, I did it. I called it out. All right, now we can put that aside. And we're going to learn this story maybe even for the first time. This story of Zacchaeus. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, verse 1, beginning of verse 1 says this. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. Some of us may know that tax collectors, the way they got the job of being a tax collector was first of all having enough money to buy the contract from the Roman government to collect the taxes from the residents, right? So they had to have enough money to put down in earnest to receive the contract from the Roman government so that they could collect the amount on the contract. But the Roman government said, really, as long as we get this money here on this contract, we're happy. And so what these tax collectors would do is they would collect more than what was on the contract, right? So this was a system that was clearly kind of rife with abuse of power. And Zacchaeus was the chief tax collector, right? So not only was there a system of people, these kind of foot soldiers that were constantly abusing this power, but Zacchaeus was chief among them. He was responsible for all of them. Like of all the cheaters, he was the best, right? Like of all the manipulators, of all the abusers, of all the bullies, he's the chief. And the fellow Israelites view Zacchaeus as a traitor, right? He is their people. He is among them. But he's siding with the Roman government, not with Israel, but with the Roman government to abuse his power to collect more money than he really ought to cheat his own people out of their money. Zacchaeus wears this mask, presents this false self of money and power. Money and power. And here's the thing about wearing a false mask of money and power is that once you put it on, you have to continually keep it on, right? As soon as there's a crack in that facade, as soon as there's, as soon as there's a hint that this might not be the case, that you might not have as much money or power as you think you have, as soon as there's that crack, all the masquerade is gone, all the false self has been obliterated. And so Zacchaeus first started to put this false mask of money and power on, and as time went on, he had to keep it and keep it and keep it until finally he becomes the chief tax collector. And he's had this false self for quite a while. The story continues in Luke 19, verse 3. Zacchaeus wanted to see who Jesus was. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. Right? Zacchaeus, of course, is a wee little man, is short, and he can't see over the crowd. And I wonder if that's because the crowd is not letting him in, right? The crowd keeps butting and trying, they don't have any power over Zacchaeus, right? He has all of this ability to abuse his power because he sides with the Roman government, but now we have a chance to finally get back at him in some small way. And so they exclude him from seeing Jesus. And so what we find in the scripture is that he runs ahead and climbs a tree. Running and climbing, these are undignified acts. These are undignified acts for a person of wealth and power in this time. This is not something that a man of means does in this time, to run and to climb. Why was he doing all this? Verse 3 says, he wanted to see Jesus. He wanted to see Jesus. What I found most often in my life is when I talk to people, even if they don't have a church home, they are interested in Jesus. A lot of our conversations have to do, when we talk about our faith, we talk about what we do, and because of my faith, I do this, which is really good. But what we realize is that Zacchaeus wanted to see Jesus. That in my conversations as I share faith, what I hear people subtly saying is, get out of the way and just tell me about Jesus. That there seems to be this desire, this thing that was placed within Zacchaeus to connect him with the God that created him. Right? This is not that in some ways Zacchaeus was broken, but he had broken activities, but there was something, a part of him that longed to be connected to the thing that created him, to the God that spoke him into being, to the Spirit that calmed the waters at the very beginning. Within Zacchaeus, there was this thing, a part of him that just knew that if he could see Jesus, it would be okay. So Zacchaeus runs. He climbs this tree, I'm sure to the jeers and to the laughter of the crowd that was around. And when he does this, we read this in verse 5, that when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and saw him. And he said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. Of course, it was an honor to welcome Jesus into his home. If you were alive in the ancient Near East, one of the greatest things that you could do would be to host a rabbi in your home, of which Jesus is. It was this very dignified thing. It would be like you hosting, like a politician or somebody who of high stature in your own home. To have other people over at your place to come see this person. That's what it was to host a rabbi at this time. And I think what happens, we read this story and we kind of gloss over this fact. Jesus knew Zacchaeus' name. Jesus knew Zacchaeus' name and called him out by name. He didn't say, hey, you up in that tree. Hey, you short guy. He said, Zacchaeus. Can you imagine the impact that made on him? One of the things I've realized in my own ministry is the power of knowing someone's name. That when we know somebody's name and we are able to call them out by name and say, hi, how are you? I'm so glad you're here. That does something more than just, hey, you. And I'll be honest, forgetting somebody's name is one of my worst fears. As a pastor, one of my worst fears is forgetting somebody's name. And whenever they say, hey, Andy, I go through that thing. You know that thing you go through whenever you're like, who is this person? And you try to gloss over the fact that you don't know their name by making up a nickname for them, and so you're just like, hey, buckaroo, the power of knowing somebody's name. Jesus looks up in this tree and says, Zacchaeus. I hope we know the power in a name. I hope we have the confidence to walk up to somebody and say, hey, I know I ought to know this, but I can't remember your name. Can you help me? And then we would do our work to write that name down and to commit it to memory. I had the privilege of being a part of Prosper United Methodist Church before I was appointed to Lover's Lane, and while I was there, I helped develop a greeting team. And unbeknownst to me, I recruited one of the best greeters that I've ever seen. His name was Micah. And Micah was in the corporate world, but he had actually learned of this strength. And so I didn't know this, but he had a piece of paper in his pocket. And when he was greeting at the front door, he would stop people that he didn't know, and he would ask them their name. And then when they walked away, he would pull out a pen and paper, and he would write down their name. Well, he greeted a family that came for their first time. It was a family of 5. They walked up, a mom and a dad and 3 little girls, and they walked up, and Micah stopped them and greeted them and said how happy he was to see them and asked for their names. And then whenever they went inside, he took out that paper and he wrote that name down. He wrote all 5 names down. And the next Sunday, when that family came up, Micah was there at the front door. He said, "Hey, Shannon. Hey, Scott. Hey, Gloria. Hey, Maddie. Hey, Alexis." And he watched as those girls' faces lit up. And that mom and dad looked at each other and they said, "This is the church for us." The power in a name. I know it's difficult. And there are many of us who'd say, I'm not good at names. And I'll be honest, none of us are. Right? None of us have this savant level. Maybe you do, but most of us don't have this savant level ability to just instantly remember somebody's name. It takes work. It takes effort. And so maybe as together as community of faith, especially when we meet somebody new, we can commit that name to memory, write it down, or do something, put it in the car, and so that when we get out of the car on Sunday morning, we can look at that name again and say, "I'm going to remember that person. They were there for their first or second time, but I'm going to remember them." Because there is power in a name. So Jesus points up in the tree and he says, "Zacchaeus," and he says, "Come down here, for I'm coming to your house. I'm going to stay at your house today." And I love this. The people begin to mutter. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He is gone to be the guest of a sinner." Look at that in verse 7. All the people started to mutter and they began to say, "He has gone. Jesus has gone to be the guest of a sinner." When was the last time that was said about us? I know COVID has, done a number of things, and one of the things has prevented us maybe from going physically into somebody's house. Maybe we're not comfortable with that. But has anybody ever accused you of being a friend with a sinner? Being a friend with a nefarious group? Being a friend with the people on the wrong side? Has anybody ever accused you of that? Because they accused Jesus. Numerous times we read in the passages about them accusing Jesus being with the wrong people. And I pray that the same thing is said about us. Jesus points in a tree, says, "Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house." The people begin to mutter, "He's gone to be the guest of a sinner." And Zacchaeus comes down and he can hear them talking, right? He hears the mutters. He hears all this happening. And so he says this, Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here, and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Look at what happened. Okay, so Zacchaeus climbs out of the tree. Jesus says, "I'm coming to your house." He climbs out of the tree. The people begin to mutter. And so Zacchaeus says, "Look, I give half of my possessions to the poor." Okay, so now half of my money has gone to the poor. And then Zacchaeus also says, "And with the other 50%, if I have cheated anyone, I will give back 4 times as much." In the Greek, we see that this is active verb. This is happening. In other words, not "I will give," but "I am giving." Look, Jesus, watch me do this. I am giving half of my money to the poor. And if I have cheated anyone, I am giving 4 times the amount. Look, I am doing it right here and now. Line up if I've cheated you. Come before me. Why? Because he saw Jesus. And Zacchaeus knew that if he was going to restore his relationship, if he was going to restore his relationship with God, it would take restoring his relationship with others. Here's the thing about sin. Sin, simply defined, is anything that breaks a relationship. If you want to know something's a sin, ask yourself, is this breaking a relationship? Either with God or with other people? And if the answer is yes, then it's most likely a sin. Sin is simply missing the mark, is not being the beings that God created us to be. It is not matching up to Christ. If it's a sin, it is breaking a relationship. Zacchaeus had spent his job breaking one relationship after another. Jesus calls him out and says, Zacchaeus, I'm here to restore relationship. And Zacchaeus immediately knew, if I'm going to restore relationship with God, it's going to take restoring relationship with others as well. I've talked about this before, but one of my favorite things is doing premarital counseling with families and with young couples as they prepare to be married. And I talk about the 6 most important words in any relationship. This is true not only for marriage, it's really helpful in marriage, but it's true for any relationship as well. The 6 most important words, they're in 2 groups of 3. The first 3 are I am sorry. I am sorry. I want you to say that with me. You ready? I am sorry. Maybe some of us, that was the first time we've said that in a while, right? I am sorry. I am sorry. You have no idea the power that comes with those words. I was wrong. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. I hid that from you. I am sorry. The 3 other important words to share in any relationship, there are 6 most important words. The first 3 are I am sorry. The last 3 are I forgive you. I forgive you. Will you say that with me? I forgive you. That's not as said as often, right? I am sorry can come out really easily. You know, whenever we're ready, we can give it. I forgive you maybe feels a little bit awkward. But see, what happens in any relationship is that there's this power differential, right? You think about it, like anytime in any relationship, there's this power. And when you say, I am sorry, that person is handing over incredible power to the other person. Admitting wrong, saying, you know what, I did something wrong. Here's all of this power in our relationship. And there's a tendency for that other person to hold on to that. By not saying, I forgive you, and in fact, by responding in some ways that are maybe inappropriate. Somebody says, I am sorry, and we say, yeah, I know you are. yeah, I bet. Or maybe one that we say more often is, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. Yes, it is. Regardless of what the other person is apologizing for, it is a big deal for somebody to say, I am sorry. And so whenever somebody hands over that power in the relationship, says, I am sorry, when that person receives it, they say, I forgive you, and they disperse that power again between us. I forgive you. I forgive you. That means I'm not going to hold this over your head again next time we have a fight. This doesn't come up again when I, want to get away with something that, I can't get away with, and so I'm going to bring this up again. No, it means I forgive you. Now, there may be different boundaries in our relationship, right? Somebody asked, in order to forgive, do you have to forget? Not necessarily, right? It's important to protect ourselves in relationship, especially with people who have addictions or when there's abuse involved. In order to say, I forgive you might mean that there are new boundaries in our relationship, ways that we live differently together. But I forgive you is incredibly important. If not for their benefit, for ours. Some of us need the courage and the strength just to forgive someone else that has wronged us. Maybe they didn't say, I am sorry, and that really hurts. And if that's the case for you, I want to say that, it does hurt. And it's not fair. But when we learn the ability to forgive them, we have the ability to move on. Jesus calls out Zacchaeus in this tree. It says, Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house. People begin to mutter, this Jesus, this rabbi has gone to be the guest of a sinner. He doesn't even know what he's doing. Zacchaeus immediately looks around the crowd and realizes the restoration of the relationship that needs to happen. And he calls out to the people, I am sorry. And Jesus says this in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, verse 9. Today, salvation has come to this house, because this man too is the son of Abraham. Listen to this, friends. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Zacchaeus says, I am sorry. Look, I am doing all this. Half my money I give to the poor. Anyone else who I've wronged, I'll give back 4 times as much. And Jesus smiles on Zacchaeus as he says, today salvation has come to this house. Salvation for Zacchaeus is not some hereafter. It is not, hey, Zacchaeus, you've guessed the right answer, and so now whenever you die, you get all this wealth again. No, salvation for Zacchaeus was restoration of a relationship. Salvation for Zacchaeus was wholeness and wellness, was purpose in his life. That's what salvation looked like for Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus turned and looked around at his crowd, his people, his tribe, and he says, I am sorry. And Jesus looked at Zacchaeus and said, I forgive you. Salvation has come to this house. Why? Jesus says, because the Son of Man has come to seek and save the lost. Why did Jesus go to be the guest of one who is a sinner? Because the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Why did he send out his disciples 2 by 2, 6 groups of 2 out into the world to do ministry like Jesus did? Because the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Why did Jesus teach women at a time when women were not taught by rabbis, that the resources of men were not used up by women, but Jesus sits Mary at his feet and teaches her in the living room because the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost? Why did Jesus touch people who were untouchable? He was around people who were unclean. He gathered the people who were on the outside because the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Because Jesus knew, he looked around at these people in this time and knew these relationships were broken. These relationships between the haves and the have-nots, the relationship between the men and the women, the minority and the majority. And Jesus looked around at these people and saw that there was a need of restoration of relationships. And I believe today that's what our world needs more than anything else. A restoration of relationship. And so that's my hope for you this week, that we would practice something this week, that we would make an intentional apology to someone today. All right, let's just try this. Today, that we would make an intentional apology to someone. Today. What I'm not saying is don't go out and stamp on somebody's foot and then make an intentional apology to them, right? Like, don't create a reason to apologize to somebody. There is somebody in our life that we need to make an apology to. Maybe as we've been talking about, I am sorry and I forgive you, somebody's face popped up in our head. Somebody's name came to mind. But maybe that's the person, or maybe as you go throughout your day, you can be looking for that opportunity to make an apology. To make an intentional apology to someone today. The second thing is this: forgive someone who doesn't deserve it. Forgive someone who doesn't deserve it. I imagine that in the time of Zacchaeus, there were some really bad things that happened because he had abused his power. There were some families that probably went without food because Zacchaeus took the money they would have used for food. There was people that could have used some kind of care that couldn't afford it because Zacchaeus had taken that money. I imagine there was a whole host of reasons that Zacchaeus shouldn't have been forgiven, regardless of the amount of money that he gave out. But Jesus said, today salvation has come to your house. Friends, I encourage you to forgive somebody who doesn't deserve it because you and I didn't deserve it. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and all of God's people said, amen.